Okay, so in the last for each loop video, you saw how we used a for each loop to basically repeatedly do the same things multiple times, right? Especially in a list, um, we invited all these people to the party. Okay, so let's sort of once you understand that, let's sort of talk about uh, the structure, the overall structure of a for each loop. So again, we have these names to invite, right? And ignore that for now. But what we have is let me actually put this up, right? So now what we want to see is we have a for, right? And we're trying to understand the structure of for loops, right? So what do we see here? So we saw that we wanted to basically declare a variable like we did up here, right? To be able to hold each of these names as we go over each name string in this list, right? So we essentially want to create a variable that is able to hold each of these elements, okay? So we need a type and a name for that variable that will be holding all these elements in the list, in the array. So basically, now we have type, the type of that, the type of each element in the list, because they're all the same. And then we have the variable name. Okay, so just like how you declare a variable. And now we have a colon. Okay, that's just the way for each loops work. And then you write the array. Okay, the array that you want to go over, to iterate over. Right? And then we have opening brace and a closing brace. And the way you sort of imagine here is inside, in between these braces, are all the statements, all the methods, all the variable declarations you need to do inside here. Okay, so it's what's called the for each loop body. So here you have the body of this for each loop, and in here you can execute anything. Basically, what do you want to do for each of those elements inside the array? And we can see that uh, if it even okay, we can see here inside the body of this for each loop, all we're doing is inviting that person, right? And obviously we could have multiple lines in here. We could have we could have it do different things. But for now, that's what we're going to do. So let's take a little bit and let that sink in a little bit. And I want you to practice um, for this number list. So up here we have this number list. And so what I want you guys to do is to first write a for loop. Okay, so first write a for loop using this syntax. And you have the example from down here. So how would you write a for loop to go over each of these numbers in the number list? Okay, so maybe you can pause the video, you can rewind to see uh, this. All right, so let me just pull this up. Let me actually pull this up, and then you can look at your code. How would you write a for each loop that goes over every element in the number list array? So pause the video and work on that for a little bit. Okay, so now let's see how you did. So first thing we're going to do is for, and I'm going to say since each element in this number list array is an integer, and we know that from here, right, integer array, and also here. So we know that it's integer, and I'm just going to say number. Now, some of you might might have a tendency to write this as plural. Personally, I don't think that's precise enough because you're only holding one element at a time, right? This number only holds one element at a time. It either holds 1 or 2 or 3. So it does not hold everything at once, right? Just like what we said up here, we didn't have the name hold Alex and Maria at the same time. We only have the name hold one element at once, okay? So I would name a number. It's almost always singular, okay? For int number in what list? In this number list array, okay? Now we need the braces, so opening braces, press enter, and then it'll automatically close this. Now it's giving me this error because I already have this number defined up here. So I'm just going to comment that out because it's annoying. And now, what do we want to do to these elements? Well, for one thing, we can print it out, right? So we can print it out in the terminal. Okay. So how do we print that number out? What is the variable that is holding each number every time this for loop runs? This variable, right? That right there. So we print out that number, that specific number. And actually, let me comment all these out so it's not in the way. Let me just, okay. So I'm commenting all that out so the computer doesn't run that. So now all we have are these statements right here. Now let me go ahead and compile. Actually, let me clear this and run this. Okay, so now it prints out 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now how can we make this more interesting, right? For example, let's say I wanted to add like 1 to each of these. So instead of printing out 1, 2, 3, I actually want to print out 2, 3, 4. How do we do that? Take a moment and maybe try coding it up on your own and see if you can achieve that. Okay, so there are multiple ways that you can do this, right? So one way you could do this is, I know that number is going to be 1 or 2 or 3, right? In either way, I want to add 1 to that number, okay? So right here in this expression, this stands for either if number was 1, then we'd get 2. If number was 2, we'd get 3. If number was 3, we'd get 4, right? And now I want to store this somewhere, right? Because right now, this number, even though we just say +1, number is not going to be changed. This number is not going to be assigned, 2, for example. If number was 1, this line is not going to automatically assign number to 2. So what we want to do is maybe create a new variable that says new number, and I can print out that new number. So okay, so let's sort of run through this code again, right? So for each loop, when we have this number, now that number will hold 1 the first time it runs through this list or this array. So now number is 1. So we set new number to 1 plus 1, which is 2. So that'll print out 2, right? And let me just, to help you sort of see that, let me run that. And actually, before I do, let me clear that. Press OK, and now it prints 2, 3, and 4. Can you trace through? Can you explain the rest of this for each loop? Can you explain how this for loop runs through and how does it get 2, 3, and 4? If you can, then you've basically sort of mastered for each loop. Okay.